Chapter 4, Flexibility. Chapter 4, Flexibility Training Concepts. Learning Objectives. Upon completion of this chapter, you will be able to explain the effects of muscle imbalance on the kinetic chain, explain the scientific rationale for the use of integrated flexibility training program, identify appropriate flexibility techniques based on athlete needs, identify appropriate flexibility techniques based on the athletic needs. They put athlete. It's got to be athletic, or its athlete's needs. Identify appropriate flexibility techniques based on the athlete's needs. Okay, there is no the. Okay, Nazim. Introduction. Integrated flexibility training is a key component for all sports performance training programs. The general purpose of flexibility training are varied. Correct muscle imbalances decreases muscle hypertonicity. Decrease muscle hypertonicity. Relieve joint stress. Improve the extensibility of the musculotendinitis junction. It's a big word. Maintain the normal functional length of all muscles. Correct muscle imbalances. Increase joint range of motion. Decrease muscle hypertonicity. Relieve joint stress. Improve the extensibility of all musculotendinitis junction, so it's where they connect, I believe. Maintain the normal functional length of all muscles. This chapter provides an overview of the most current rationale supporting flexibility training so the sports performance professionals could understand the dynamic nature of independent flexibility training and can design IFT program for optimum performance and function. This is fun stuff. Flexibility. Here we go. See? It's kind of applicable to what I got to do. So flexibility is the normal extensibility of all soft tissues to allow full range of motion. Range of motion of a joint and optimum neuromuscular connection from the neurons to the muscle efficiency throughout all functional movements. Human movement efficiency requires optimal levels of flexibility. While flexibility training is a key component for developing optimal neuromuscular efficiency, many sports performance professionals lack an understanding of current concepts in flexibility training. Summarizes, table 4.1 summarizes the benefits of IFT. Integrated flexibility training. Benefits of integrated flexibility training. The benefits. This table is the benefits of integrated training. Flexibility. Decreased chance of injury. Prevent the development of muscle imbalances. Correct existing muscle imbalances and joint dysfunction. Improve posture and correct postural distortions. So improve your posture. You get longer. You get length. Elongate yourself, lengthen yourself, and correct postural distortions. Postural distortions are some things that are short and overactive, overused, and underactive on one side. Enhanced strength, joint range of motion, and power. The purpose of integrated flexibility training. Pro tip. Regardless of the goal, always begin a flexibility program with movement assessments, such as the overhead squat or the single leg squat. These assessments help determine the muscles that need to be focused on in a flexibility program. If a muscle is overactive or tight, it may be impeding or altering proper movement and will need to be corrected to enhance movement. If a muscle is overactive or tight, it may be impeding or altering proper movement and will need to be corrected to enhance movement. All right. The purpose of integrated flexibility training. Optimum alignment and function of each component of the human movement system is a cornerstone to a sports performance training program. As shown in Figure 4.2, when one segment in the human movement system is out of alignment or not functioning optimally, predictable patterns of dysfunction develop and initiate the cumulative injury cycle. which will be covered later in this chapter. Once this series of events begins, decreased neuromuscular efficiency leads to tissue overload and potential to an injury. As seen in figures 4.3, 4.4, optimal neuromuscular efficiency of the human movement system can only exist if all components, muscular, articular, and neural, function optimally and interdependently. Cumulative injury cycle, a cycle whereby an injury will induce inflammation, muscle spasms, adhesions, altered neuromuscular control, and muscle imbalances. That's the cumulative injury cycle. Creates muscle spasms, adhesions, altered neuromuscular control, and muscle imbalances. Chapter 4. Causes of muscle imbalances, page 157. Causes of muscle imbalances shows that muscle imbalances can be caused by problems ranging from postural stress to decreased recovery and delayed regeneration. These muscle imbalances result in altered reciprocal inhibition, synergistic dominance, arthrokinematic dysfunction, and decreased neuromuscular control. This is flexibility chapter. Altered reciprocal inhibition is the concept of muscle inhibition caused by a tight agonist and decreased neural drive to a functional antagonist. So basically, the one muscle is shutting off, which is the antagonist, shutting down. This may result in altered force-couple relationships and synergistic dominance, which lead to development of faulty movement patterns and poor neuromuscular control. What is synergistic dominance? Synergistic dominance is the neuromuscular phenomenon that occurs when synergists take over the function of a weak or inhibited prime mover. So the synergists are kind of the helper muscles. This may cause faulty movement patterns and may lead to tissue overload, decreased neuromuscular efficiency, and injury. What is arthrokinematic dysfunction? Arthrokinematic dysfunction is the biomechanical dysfunction in two articular partners that lead to abnormal joint movement, arthrokinematics, and proprioception. Altered reciprocal inhibition, synergistic dominance, and arthrokinematic dysfunction may lead to decreased neuromuscular tissue overload and injury. This process initiates and continues to escalate the cumulative injury cycle. Causes of muscle imbalances. Pattern overload, poor technical skill. Aging, decreased recovery and regeneration following activity. So many that don't work out correctly, they're getting this. Repetitive movement, same thing over and over. Causes of muscle imbalance. Lack of core strength, immobilization, cumulative trauma, lack of neuromuscular control, and postural stress. So if you're repeating movements, not good. Core strength is down. Most are. Sitting too much, like I'm doing right now, studying. Immobilization, sitting down again. Lying down, not moving. Cumulative trauma, repetitive trauma, it's accumulating. Lack of neuromuscular control. You don't have control as much as you think you do. You have to work on control. That's what strength training and fitness is about. Creating neuromuscular control, understanding you can move in every direction. Move your limbs, move this limb, move that limb. And postural stress, well, it's caused by all the above. Muscle tissue structure and function. The structure of a muscle tissue must be fully understood before being able to grasp how a muscle lengthens. Automatically, muscles share common characteristics at the cellular level, although they come in many sizes and perform various functions. Figure 4.5 illustrates the classical organization of skeletal muscle. The details of subcellular structure of skeletal muscle and basic physiology of muscle contraction are beyond the scope of this chapter, but it can be found in any introductory anatomy and physiology textbook. Physiological. So you can find that on your own over there. Ooh, thick filaments and such. All right. Muscle is composed of strands of tissue called fascicles. Composed of strands of tissue called fascicles. Each individual fascicle is comprised of fasculi, which are bundles of muscle fibers. Oof. Each individual fascicle is comprised of fasculi, which are bundles of muscle fibers. Muscle fibers are composed of thousands of myofibrils. Oof. Muscle fibers are composed of thousands of myofibrils. I don't illustrate it too well, which contain the contractile components of the muscle tissue. The functional unit of muscle in the microfibrils is called the sarcomere. The functional unit of muscle in the myofibrils is called the sarcomere. Each sarcomere is made up of myofilament, even smaller, which include overlapping thick and thin contractile proteins, primarily actin and myosin, and the regulatory proteins troponin and tropomyosin. It's a lot. So each sarcomere is made up of these little things, myofilaments, which include overlapping and thick contractile proteins, primarily actin and myosin. Primarily actin, and the regulatory proteins troponin and tropomyosin. The process of muscular contraction occurs when a neural impulse from the brain to the alpha motor neuron crosses the neuromuscular junction. This impulse stimulates a similar action potential along the muscle fiber membrane. This impulse stimulates a similar action potential along the muscle fiber membrane. I guess an action potential is an action. Fiber membrane. This impulse stimulates a similar action potential along the muscle fiber membrane, the sarcolemma, triggering an exchange of calcium and potassium to expose the active sites on the thin actin filament and allow the myosin cross bridges to pull the actin filaments toward the center of the sarcomere and shortening the sarcomere. Don't even understand that. I'll be honest, people. So this impulse stimulates a similar action potential along the muscle fiber membrane, the sarcolemma, triggering turning on exchange of calcium and potassium to expose the active sites on the thin actin filament. So these must be some kind of something going on, and all allow the myosin cross bridges to pull the actin filaments toward this center of the sarcomere and shortening the sarcomeres. I guess it's going inward. See, this sliding of actin filament past the myosin filament and result in shortening of the sarcomere, the sliding of actin filament past the myosin filament. This sliding of actin filament past the myosin filament, I guess they're sliding, and resulting in shortening of the sarcomere. Pictures, people. When multiplied over thousands of sarcomeres, leads to visible shortening of the muscle. So you're shortening. That's the length. Okay. So it's pulling in. Oh, wow. Look at that. Eureka. It's pulling inward. All that to say, it's pulling towards one another. You kidding me? When a fiber is stimulated to contract, it contracts completely, which is known as the all or none principle. A muscle fiber is unable to vary the degree to which it contracts. If the action potential is strong enough to induce the molecular events of contraction, the fiber will contract completely. So if action potential is strong enough to induce that molecular event, so I guess it's the potassium and the calcium, molecular event of contraction, the fiber will contract. Boom. The amount of force generated by the whole muscle is dictated by a number of factors, including the number of fibers recruited. the rate at which the central nervous system stimulates the neuron and the fibers of the neuron. Connective tissue. Connective tissue has multiple functional categories. Enclose and separate tissue, connect dissimilar tissue, support and movement, energy support, energy storage, cushion and insulate, transport and protection. Enclose and separate, connect dissimilar tissues, support and movement, this is connective tissue, energy storage, cushion and insulate, transport and protect. Nice. The protective covering around most tissue, including muscle fibers, are made up of connective tissue. The basic structure of connective tissue is illustrated in figure 4.6, which shows that connective tissue is composed of two types of protein bases. Two types. Connective tissue is composed of two types: collagenous and elastic fibers. Collagenous fibers are composed mainly of strong, inelastic collagen, one of the most common proteins in the body. Inelastic collagen. Collagenous fibers are composed mainly of strong, inelastic collagen, one of the most common proteins in the body. Elastic fibers contain elastin, a highly extensible protein capable of returning to its initial length after being stretched or compressed. Connective tissues of importance to flexibility and the musculoskeletal system includes tendons, which connect muscle to bone, ligaments, which connect bone to bone, and fascia, which binds muscles into separate groups. The white stuff, like on a chicken. There are three layers to the fascial sheaths, according to the structures they surround: endomyosin, perimyosin, and epimyosin. There are three layers of the fascial sheaths, according to the structures they surround: endomyosin, perimyosin, around, epi, on top. I gotta trace that. Endomyosin is the innermost fascial layer that encases individual muscle fibers. The sheath that binds groups of muscle fibers into fasciculi is called the perimysium. Perimysium. Trying to look at it there. You just need videos. The outermost layer of the muscle fiber is the epimyosin. This layer binds entire fascicles together. These connective tissue must also respond to flexibility training for permanent change, i.e. plastic deformation, to occur. Overuse injuries initiate the cumulative injury cycle, figure 4.2, which stimulates the development of inelastic fibrous adhesions. So you get this overuse, and then you get the cumulative injury cycle. You know, it's a bunch of, it's a breakdown, one thing after another. I don't have it here. So, overuse injuries initiate the cumulative injury cycle, which stimulate the development of inelastic fibrous adhesions. Inelastic fibrous adhesions. Bad. These adhesions form in the connective tissue within layers of muscle. This prevents normal muscle mechanics and normal soft tissue extensibility. So people don't correctly move. They get wrapped up in this cumulative injury cycle. They stop moving in that way, and now they throw their whole movement off. It doesn't matter if my shoulder gets stuck. Now I'm not trying to fix it because I'm scared of pain. You have to deal with the pain to some extent. This is just a fact. And then you get a little stronger. You know, you'd rather be weaker. You want to be weak in pain or strong in pain. It's up to you. And all tissue contribute to joint stiffness to varying degrees. Joint capsule and ligament represents 47% of joint stiffness, followed by muscle fascia, 41%, tendon, 10%, and skin, 2%. Joint capsule and ligaments represent 47% of joint stiffness, followed by muscle fascia, 41%, tendon, 10%, and skin, 2%. Although the myofascial system is ranked second, this tissue is a primary focus of flexibility routine. Although myofascia system is ranked second, this tissue is a primary focus of a flexibility routine. Wow, fascia. It's important to fix your fascia. Fix your fascia. Tissue properties of the muscle and fascia allow for greater elasticity and a greater adaptive potential than ligamentous tissue. Oof, let me run that back. Tissue properties of the muscle and fascia allow for greater elasticity and a greater adaptive potential than ligamentous tissue. One more time. Tissue properties of the muscle and fascia allow for a greater elasticity and a greater adaptive potential than just ligamentous tissue. Wow. So your ligaments, so your joint tissue, so you need to pull that fascia open. Is that what they're saying? Furthermore, tendons are biologically designed to transmit tension to the skeleton, so elasticity would be counter to its primary function. Furthermore, tendons are biologically designed to transmit tension to the skeleton, so elasticity would be to its counter to its primary function. Furthermore, tendons are biologically designed to transmit tension to the skeleton. Tendons transmit tension to the skeleton, so elasticity would be counter to its primary function. Elasticity, overstretching. Overstretching ligaments and produce unstable joints. Overstretching ligaments can produce unstable joints. Ooh. So tendon is muscle to bone, ligament is bone to bone. So unstable joints can alter. Overstretching ligaments can produce unstable joints. So a lot of people must be overstretching their ligaments. Jeez. Ligaments attach bone to bone. Unstable joints can alter normal length tension relationships, force couple relationships. Unstable joints can alter the normal length tension relationships, force couple relationships, and joint orthokinematics, leading to synergistic dominance and faulty movement patterns that in turn initiate the cumulative injury cycle by placing unwanted stress on the entire kinetic chain. Unstable joints can alter the normal length tension relationships, force couple relationships, and joint orthokinematics, leading to synergistic dominance and faulty movement patterns that in turn initiate cumulative injury cycle by placing unwanted stress on the kinetic chain, your neck, your back. Things are thrown off, they ain't working. And once again, they're going to set off that cumulative injury cycle. Unstable joints, etc., break proper length tension relationships, alter force couple relationship. Okay. Force couple, it's like your joint connects to your other joint and it's moving in the right joint. It's something like that. Myofascial neural and vascular structures incur stress as a result of an applied stretch. So an IFT program must be designed accordingly. Myofascial, neural, and vascular structures incur stress as a result of an applied stretch. So an IFT program must be designed accordingly. Neurodynamics. Neurodynamics. All neural tissue must adapt constantly changing joint angles and alterations in the position of the adjacent tissue. Neurodynamics. All neural tissue must adapt to constantly changing joint angles and alteration in the position of the adjacent tissue. Muscle imbalances, joint dysfunctions, and postural distortions place abnormal tension on the neural tissue. This affects the structural integrity of the neural structures and leads to abnormal neural dynamics. Ooh, that means things are starting to fire incorrectly. Here we go. Review of the neuroanatomy of the peripheral nervous system. Oh, peripheral nervous system. The CNS is made up of the portions of the overall nervous system that are contained within bone and meninges. The brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is external to the central nervous system and includes the spinal nerves, sensory receptors, nerves, ganglia, and plexus. Primary divisions of the PNS include the sensory division, takes information from the peripheral sensory receptors to the central nervous system, or the motor division, information from the central nervous system to effector organs. Bring it back. The peripheral nervous system is external to the central nervous system and includes the spinal nerves, sensory receptors, nerves, ganglia, and plexus. Oof, it's a bunch of different things going on. Spinal nerve, sensory. Okay. Primary divisions of the PNS include the sensory division. Primary includes the sensory division. Takes information from the peripheral sensory receptors to the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. Or the motor division, information from the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, to effector sites, effector organs. Those are Golgi tendons or something. The motor division is further divided into the somatic nervous system, which delivers information from the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, to the skeletal muscle, and the autonomic nervous system, which transmits information from the central nervous system to smooth muscle, that's your cardiac muscle, and some glands. Wow. The motor division is further divided into somatic nervous system, which delivers information from the central nervous system to skeletal muscle, and the autonomic nervous system, which transmits information from central nervous system to smooth muscle. This is automatic. This is behind the scenes. I think the motor nervous system. Autonomic is all behind the scenes. All natural breathing. Not even so, it's your autonomic system firing from your motor division. It's further into somatic nerves. I don't know what somatic is, but whatever. Nerds! How does it feel to be nerds out there? You know, nobody's watching this. The parasympathetic nervous system, which controls resting and vegetative function. Ooh, maybe I'm wrong. The entire nervous system controls the digestive tract. The enteric nervous system controls the digestive tract. The functional unit of nervous system is a neuron. Alrighty then. Functional unit. Bundles of neuron make up a nerve and are surrounded by endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium, and mesoneurium. Whew. A lot of neuriums. These connective tissue structures form a tough supporting framework. These connective tissue structures form a tough supporting framework for the contained neuron. Connective tissue structures form a tough supporting framework for the contained neuron. Okay. The neural connective tissue are self-innervated by nervi nervorum. The neural connective tissues are self-innervated by the nervi nervorum. It's there somewhere. Nervorum. This intervention, along with an abundant blood supply, makes the connective tissue of the nerve extremely reactive and pain sensitive. This intervention, along with an abundant blood supply, there's a lot of blood to the nerve, makes the connective tissue of the nerve extremely reactive and sensitive to pain. So connective tissue have a lot of blood of the nerve. Okay. Wow. Just plug that out, man. Neuropathophysiology. Neuropathophysiology. The integrated The integrity of the neural tissue can be compromised by acute injury, compression, chronic injury, repetitive micro-trauma, muscle imbalances, joint dysfunctions, and poor posture. That's the integrity of the neural tissue can be compromised by acute injury, compression, chronic injury, repetitive micro-trauma, muscle imbalances, joint dysfunctions, and poor posture. Tissue trauma initiates a neurogenic reflex mechanism, the cumulative injury cycle, and creates morphological changes in the microenvironment of the neural tissue, resulting in intraneural edema, chemical irritation, tissue hypoxia, and microvascular stasis. Oof, it's a lot. Tissue trauma initiates a neurogenic reflex mechanism. The cumulative injury cycle, a lot of bad things, creates a morphological change in the microenvironment of the neural tissue, resulting in an intraneural edema, I guess, edema. Edema. What's edema? Stay tuned, boys and girls. Edema. Edema, the swelling of soft tissue as a result of excessive fluid. Okay, so edema, excessive fluid. Edema, excessive fluid. Edema, excessive fluid. Must progress. Edema is excessive fluid. Okay, swelling. This tissue trauma. Okay, let's do it again. Wrap it up. Tissue trauma initiates a neurogenic reflex mechanism, the cumulative injury cycle, and creates morphological change in microenvironment of the neural tissue, resulting in intraneural edema, swelling, chemical irritation, tissue hypoxia, and microvascular stasis. These alterations stimulate the nociceptors, pain, and result in pain. Pain receptors causing protective muscle spasms. Don't do it anymore. I'm going to spaz. That decrease the provocation to the inflamed, neural tissue. That's easy. So you want to stop using it, and then you stop using it, and everything falls apart. The microspasms alter length and tension relationships. Microspasms force couple relationship and joint arthrokinematics, further altering movement patterns. This process may eventually lead to intraneural fibrosis and decreased neural tissue, and may prevent normal neural dynamics during functional movements and further perpetuate the dysfunctional cycle. Tissue trauma, intraneural edema, chemical irritation, tissue hypoxia, microvascular stasis, stimulated nociceptor pain. And that heading is neurophysiology. It's not neuropathy. Jesus. Why now, tears? How many we got? Especially so small. Excuse me, boys and girls. Okay. Factors limiting flexibility. 163. Atrophy, the loss in muscle fiber size. Atrophy, the loss in muscle fiber size. Charlie Babbitt, atrophy. See, these are all roots. Never taught us that. Factors limiting flexibility. Factors that limit flexibility vary on an individual basis. Aging and immobilization are two limiting factors important to the sports performance professional. Aging and immobilization are two limiting factors important to the sports performance professional. Factors that limit flexibility vary on an individual's basis. Wow. Effects of aging. The body's ability to remain flexible is reduced through the natural process of aging. We don't know how much. Physical changes attributed to aging that affect flexibility include muscular and neural atrophy, connective tissue hypertrophy, increased stiffness, and tissue dehydration. I would also say that their brain gets worn down because they're not flexible. Anyway, the major physical change in the body that affects its flexibility is loss of muscle protein from atrophy or sarcopenia. Atrophy is the loss in muscle fiber size. Atrophy is the loss of muscle fiber size. Sarcopenia is a decrease in muscle fiber size. Sarcopenia is a decrease in muscle fiber size. Sarcopenia is a decrease in muscle fiber size. Slow. Decrease. Penia. This loss in fiber quantity and quality is often accompanied by the replacement of muscle fibers with fibrous, fatty connective tissue. The loss in fiber quantity and quality is often accompanied by the replacement of muscle fibers with fibrous, fatty connective tissue. Ooh. The aging process causes muscle and neural atrophy and varies from person to person. The reduction of neural cells has been blamed for the general decline in motor control skills in older adults. The reduction of neural cells has been blamed for the general decline in motor control skills in older adults. Wow, the reduction of neural cells. As activity levels decrease, myofascial and neural atrophy increases. As activity decreases, myofascial, and neural atrophy increases. You can have atrophy to your myofascia. Oh, you're screwed. Wow. Less extensible fibrous connective tissue atrophies at a lower rate than muscle. Less extensible fibrous connective tissue atrophies at a slower rate than muscle, meaning greater concentration of fibrous, fatty connective tissues are present with aging. Less extensible fibrous connective tissue atrophies. Less extensible fibrous connective tissue atrophies at a slower rate than muscle, meaning greater concentration of fibrous, fatty connective tissue are present with aging. The reduction of neural and muscular cells leads to decreased neuromuscular efficiency, which further restrict functional mobility. Soft tissue dehydration is a natural process of aging. Tissue studies have shown that the water content in an infant tendons is 85%. Tissue studies have shown that the water content in infant tendons is 85%, which decreases to 70% in adults. If you don't drink enough water, I wonder if that has anything to do with it. Atrophy, muscular and neural, soft tissue dehydration, and other physical changes attributed to aging can be delayed with properly designed integrated training program and following the integrated flexibility continuum. You guys got a money maker here. Effects of aging: muscular hypertrophy, neural atrophy, connective tissue hypertrophy. Connective tissue hypertrophy. Oof, you don't want that. Swelling of the joints and tendons, etc. Increase tissue stiffness. Increases tissue stiffness. Oof. Tissue dehydration. Tissue dehydration. Wow. Well, your tissue gets dehydrated from not being flexible. So the more flexible you are, maybe you're getting blood to everything and fluids, whatever they may be. Synovial. Effects of immobilization. Immobilization has a varying effects on tissue. Studies have demonstrated that muscle resting length and its length tension properties will change if the muscle is immobilized in a lengthened or shortened position for extended periods of time. When a muscle is immobilized in a shortened position, there is a reduction in fiber length due to 40% reduction in sarcomeres concentration and an increase in the in the proportion of connective tissue, resulting in reduced. When a muscle is immobilized in a shortened position, there is a reduction in what fiber length? A reduction in fiber length. When a muscle is immobilized in a shortened position, there is a reduction in fiber length. Shortened position reduction due to a 40% reduction in the sarcomere's concentration. It must get smaller. 40% reduction in sarcomere, so you get less concentrated. And an increase in the proportion of connective tissue. And an increase in the proportion of connective tissue, resulting in reduced tissue extensibility, and a loss of joint range of motion that leads to altered length tension relationships, forescalpal relationships, joint orthokinematics, and abnormal movement patterns. Part 1, Chapter 4. Part 1, Chapter 4.